March 14, 2024, 4:52 a.m., a port access gate opened without a clearance request. No alarm registered. No override was logged. Two unmarked vehicles crossed a restricted federal perimeter reserved for customs seizure operations. Their transponders identified as inactive units scheduled for decommissioning. Surveillance feeds showed personnel moving with agency standard formation discipline. Yet no operation had been authorized in that sector. Inside a bonded warehouse, sealed containers were already breached. Inventory control systems updated themselves, reflecting a seizure order that did not exist. Digital manifests listed a quantity exceeding internal overdose projection thresholds. An ICE command node received biometric pings from agents not deployed that morning. An FBI task force dashboard populated with live entries before supervisors logged in. A military logistics server mirrored the data, flagged as supporting transport stabilization. No warrants appeared in the system. No briefing packets had been issued. No chain of command acknowledged responsibility. Investigators would later conclude the operation was already underway before any agency formally became aware of it. March 14, 2024, 4:52 a.m. Investigators would later identify the initial anomaly as an automated activation without human initiation. A port access gate at a federally bonded logistics zone transitioned from locked to open status absent a credential handshake. The system registered no fault condition, no manual override, and no supervisory authorization. Access logs displayed a routine cycle, indistinguishable from approved operations. Within minutes, two vehicles entered the restricted zone. Their visual profiles aligned with standard federal transport assets: neutral paint, non-reflective surfaces, encrypted plate masks. Transponder signals identified the units as inactive, flagged in asset registries for scheduled decommissioning. No alert was generated. Closed-circuit surveillance captured personnel movement consistent with interagency tactical doctrine. Spacing, pacing, and directional discipline mirrored Joint Task Force standards. However, no tasking order existed. Regional command centers showed no active deployment for that grid. Investigators would later conclude that the trigger event was not a breach in the traditional sense. It was an activation, one that used existing permissions, dormant credentials, and pre-approved pathways to initiate movement inside a controlled federal environment without generating friction. The first internal notification occurred only after inventory systems updated themselves. The bonded warehouse inventory platform reflected a completed seizure entry before supervisory staff accessed the system. Container identification numbers were marked as compromised. Digital seals were logged as broken under federal authority. A seizure reference code appeared, syntactically valid, procedurally impossible. Supervisors at an ICE Regional Operations Center reported biometric pings from agents whose duty status indicated off-cycle availability. The biometrics were valid. The timestamps aligned with surveillance footage. Yet the agents were not present in briefing rosters. An FBI task force dashboard populated with real-time operational metrics. Evidence intake counters incremented. Chain of custody fields auto-filled with agency identifiers. No case number was attached. Simultaneously, a Department of Defense logistics server mirrored the data stream. The activity was labeled as Transport Stabilization Support, terminology typically reserved for disaster response or high-risk material containment. No request for support had been filed. Investigators would later assess that the discovery phase was marked by system compliance. Every platform behaved as designed. The anomaly existed not in malfunction, but in coordination. Multiple independent systems accepting the same unauthorized reality. Preliminary quantity assessments exceeded internal escalation thresholds. Digital manifests referenced approximately 3 million dosage units of synthetic opioid material. The figures were consistent across systems, suggesting pre-aligned data inputs rather than reactive estimation. Analysts reviewing the container profiles noted industrial packaging methods. The materials were divided into standardized sublots, compatible with secondary distribution without further processing. This indicated upstream refinement and downstream intent. Routing metadata embedded in shipping records suggested a multi-node distribution model. The Florida location appeared not as an endpoint, but as a convergence hub. Historical shipping patterns showed repeated short-duration stops, minimal dwell time, and rapid redistribution. Investigators would later conclude that the scale of material indicated a supply chain capable of sustaining prolonged market saturation. The volume alone suggested financial flows, chemical sourcing, and transportation access beyond small network capacity. No conclusions were formally drawn regarding origin. However, intelligence suggested that the logistics profile aligned with transnational operations, utilizing maritime, commercial, and informal transport layers simultaneously. This phase of the assessment focused on how such an operation could function without generating early detection. Investigators identified layered access privileges across federal, state, and commercial systems. No single credential granted full operational freedom. Instead, partial permissions combined to create a functional whole. Dormant accounts provided entry. Legacy contracts provided cover. Interagency data sharing agreements enabled visibility without scrutiny. Shipping entities associated with the containers were registered through shell structures with compliant tax histories. Inspections conducted in previous months resulted in no flags. The entities demonstrated regulatory fluency, meeting requirements precisely without deviation. Port Authority logs showed routine cooperation. Customs inspections were waived under risk-based algorithms that deprioritized the shipments due to historical compliance scores. The algorithms themselves were unaltered. Investigators would later assess that the facilitation was systemic rather than conspiratorial. No evidence indicated a centralized command issuing illicit orders. Instead, the operation exploited institutional trust. Procedures designed for efficiency became pathways for concealment. Military logistics involvement remained indirect. Data mirroring suggested contingency preparedness rather than active participation. Analysts noted that similar support flags had appeared in prior hazardous material exercises. The assessment concluded that the operation functioned within the gaps between authorities. Each entity operated within its mandate. Collectively, those mandates formed an unmonitored corridor. Forensic review of digital infrastructure revealed synchronized account creation across multiple jurisdictions. The accounts predated the seizure by years. Activity levels were minimal, consistent with maintenance rather than use. Financial analysis identified transaction flows routed through compliant institutions. The transfers were fragmented, structured below reporting thresholds, and categorized under legitimate service codes. No single transaction appeared anomalous. Physical inspections of the containers revealed concealed compartments integrated into structural components. The modifications did not compromise integrity and were undetectable through routine scanning. Investigators would later conclude the design required specialized engineering. Communications metadata suggested the use of ephemeral channels. No content was recovered. Timing analysis indicated coordination windows aligned with port staffing cycles. The proof, investigators concluded, was cumulative. No single artifact confirmed intent. The infrastructure itself, its persistence, integration, and adaptability, served as the primary indicator of organized trafficking capability. Following the incident, systems were audited without public notification, access privileges were reviewed, legacy accounts were deactivated, algorithmic risk models were recalibrated. The seized materials were reclassified under controlled documentation. Distribution impact assessments were conducted internally. No public attribution was issued. Investigators would later note that the operation's exposure resulted not from detection, but from timing misalignment. A convergence of automated processes surfaced the activity simultaneously, collapsing plausible deniability. The final assessment characterized the event as a demonstration of capability rather than a completed objective. The infrastructure, analysts suggested, likely extended beyond the disrupted node. No confirmation of dismantlement was recorded. The case file remained open, segmented, and restricted.